Hi, young people. I'm Dan Serns, the Evangelism Coordinator for the Texas Conference, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. And I just know that you are the generation of promise. We know that this gospel will go to all the world. We know it's going to be young people who are leading the way. And I'm thankful that you are opening your heart to God and looking for ways to work together to take this gospel to all the people in your circles of influence and on beyond that. Let's have a word of prayer as we begin. Lord, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in Thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I have a question for you. And I know what the answer is because I know human nature. Have you ever been tempted to do something that you knew was wrong to do, but you felt a lot of pressure to do it anyway? Well, there was a young man a number of years ago in the state of Florida. He lived in Orlando. His name was Scott Green. And Scott was great at construction, but he was even better at water skiing. And of all places to water ski almost all year long, Orlando, Florida is a great place. So Scott would water ski every evening after he'd finished his construction work, and he got better and better until he was entering competitions. And he began to win some state competitions, and the day came when he was going to enter the National Water Ski Championship competition. And that year it was hosted right there in Orlando, Florida. But he looked at the schedule and he discovered, you see, there are generally three types of ways you get points to be the champion. One is trick skis, and another is slalom courses, and another is ski jump. And as he looked at the schedule, he saw that those were scheduled for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And of course, Scott knew what God says. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. If you will turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your own pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord honorable, then the Lord will honor you. And so Scott had that struggle in his heart. Is he going to go for the national championship, or at least compete, or is he going to give it up? Or is he going to enter the first 2 days and then give it up? So friends encouraged him, just go the first 2 days and see what happens. And those first 2 days were amazing. He racked up so many points on Thursday and Friday. He was the sure national champion if he would just show up, put on skis, get the points that came with that, and then leave. Then his friend said, Scott, you're the new champion. And he said, no. And they said, what do you mean? And he said, I won't be here tomorrow. What? Are you feeling sick? What's wrong with you? And he said, no, tomorrow is the Sabbath. Well, just talk to your pastor and get permission to... He says, it's not about my pastor. It's about God and God's Word. Well, God will understand. And he says, yes, but what will He understand? He'll understand what my priorities are and that He's not in charge. Well, Scott, just show up. All you need to do is show up, put on those skis, and leave. You don't have to ski. It'll all be okay. And Scott felt that pressure that comes, that many times when we know what is right and wrong, but it just seems so little to get something so wonderful like a national championship, that we really are in a struggle. Scott determined to be faithful to Jesus because Jesus, he knew, was the only one who could give him eternal life. Jesus was the only one who had shed his blood for Scott. So on Sabbath morning, when all of the others were headed out to this National Ski Championship, Scott headed to Sabbath school and church. And when he got home there, and this was a number of years ago, there was an answering machine and there are blinking lights, and he had lots and lots of messages. And they said, Scott, did you hear what happened? Did you hear what happened? No, I was at Sabbath school and worship service. It got rained out. And he said, well, it didn't rain here, and you're only 10 miles away. It got rained out. Tomorrow is going to be the last part of the championship. And that was the year that Scott Green became the national water ski champion. and was a champion for the Lord because he was faithful to God. You know, in these last days, young people, you are going to be pressured to do things that seem so little, but the outcome can be so far off what God has for you. And I want to invite you today to just open your Bibles to the book of Daniel. Right here, the book of Daniel, chapter 1. You know, God gave Daniel, who was a young man, amazing experiences. And in Daniel chapter 1, we learn more about that. You see, the book of Daniel has prophecies and stories. And the prophecies show us when we're living in the time of the end. And the stories show us how to live in the time of the end. So we're going to look at one of those stories and unpack it here for a little bit today. So Daniel chapter 1, beginning with verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. Now I'm going to invite you to circle or highlight or underline Babylon and Jerusalem, because Babylon represents Satan's kingdom. He is the one who is working behind the scenes there. And Jerusalem represents God's kingdom. He was the one trying to work through his covenant people. And so we see this Babylon, Jerusalem. In fact, it shows up in the book of Revelation as well. You have spiritual Babylon and spiritual Jerusalem, the New Jerusalem. What is literal and local in Daniel is spiritual and universal in Revelation. So here we have this great controversy happening behind the scenes, and we have unpacked here 5 strategies Satan uses to try to have each of us compromise. And we can see all of those exposed right here, so we can see it's not just some little thing about putting on water skis on Sabbath, but there is this great controversy battle that's happening for our eternal salvation. And it has to do with how we will line up with Satan's kingdom or line up with Jesus' kingdom. So let's get into it. Here we go. The first strategy, verses 3 and 4, Daniel 1. Then the king instructed Ashpenaz, that's the king being Nebuchadnezzar, instructed Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and who they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. I invite you to circle those 2 words, language and literature. You see, Nebuchadnezzar had captured Jerusalem, and he'd taken all these people captive over there to Babylon. And then he said, I've got their bodies, but I want their minds and their souls. That's what happens with the devil. He doesn't just want the body, he wants the mind and the soul if possible. And so Nebuchadnezzar was very creative. He said, get the good-looking, best-looking young people, get the smartest ones. If they have descendants or lineage through the kings, that's even better. And we're going to put them into a 3-year training program so that they look like Jews, but they think like Babylonians. Here's part of the key. The day and age that we live in, the devil doesn't mind if we look like Christians as long as we think like Babylonians. And so he said, we're going to use the language and literature of the Babylonians to get them to think like Babylonians. Well, back in their day, it was what you would read and what you would study. In the Dark Ages, it wouldn't be language and literature, it would be arts and architecture. In our day, it would be movies and music. So these were tools that the devil was trying to use to bring compromise, so that on the outside you looked one way, but on the inside you were thinking like Babylon, thinking like Satan's kingdom. You see, that is why when we go to Europe, if you ever have a chance to travel around Europe, wow, those big cathedrals and those ancient ruins and all of that, in the city of Parma, Italy. That's where we get the word Parmesan cheese. It came originally from Parma, Italy. In the city of Parma in northern Italy, there's this big, beautiful cathedral that was built about the 12 or 1300s. And next to it is a large building called a baptistry. Yes, baptistry. They actually had a separate building next to the church where they would have the baptisms. And they would bring the baptismal candidates into that building and instruct them and then baptize them, and then they could come into the church and be part of the church. Well, this was at a time when the church had made lots and lots of compromises and where the Bible was not easily available. And when you go into the baptistry building there, you will see some amazing things. You'll see some paintings on the wall, and you'll see some sculpture. And when you look at the paintings on the wall, you will see a few paintings from the Bible, but then you will see more and more paintings that were traditions of the medieval church and false teachings based on false ideas right there. And then you look up and you see these sculptures and you think, well, who are those? Are those some of the Bible people? You look a little closer and you discover those are the signs of the zodiac. Right there. They would use those signs and these pictures to teach the people what they thought they needed to be baptized. And here's this big baptistry pool. But then you look up in the ceiling and you see a painting or mosaic of John the Baptist baptizing Jesus with just a little shell pouring water on him. Not a full Baptist. So you can see why today, when tourists go through there, they go, oh, look at the beautiful architecture and look at the beautiful mosaics and paintings. And what's all this water here for? They don't use the water for anything but just to reflect the false teachings in the paintings. In the Dark Ages, they used art and architecture to try to compromise Bible truth. But today, the devil is especially looking at movies and music. And so what we have to do is we have to say, what am I feeding my mind? Is the music that I'm listening to making me more like God's kingdom or more like Satan's kingdom? Are the movies that I'm watching, are they making me think more like God's kingdom or like Satan's kingdom? And this will help us begin to identify why compromises temptation seems to be going the wrong direction and we seem to give in so often. Many times it's what we're feeding our mind, and we can decide early on what we let into our mind. So the first one is language and literature, movies and music that Satan tries to use in a negative way. God can use it in a good way, but we want to go with God's way. Second, we go to verse 5, Daniel 1, verse 5. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve the king. Now I want to invite you to circle two words here too. Delicacies and wine. Now remember, these were good Jewish boys who had been captured and brought from Jerusalem to Babylon. And those good Jewish boys from good homes were used to eating fruits and grains and nuts and vegetables and perhaps some thing that the Bible calls clean animals that were allowed to be eaten. And they're used to drinking water and fresh grape juice and those things. And now the king says, it's party time here in Babylon. And so when they sat at the king's table, what they see is the king's delicacies, all kinds of rich foods and unclean animals and other things that they knew and had been told that is not what you're supposed to be eating. And that wine is not the fresh grape juice, it is alcoholic wine. You see, in the Bible, the word wine is used in two very different ways. One, it can mean the fresh grape juice that pours out of the wine press when the fresh grapes are stomped on and you have the fresh grape juice, but that's called wine in the Bible. And it says, like in Psalm 114, that is wonderful to be delighted in. But then there's the other kind of wine mentioned in the Bible, and that is when that fresh grape juice is spent a long time and becomes fermented, becomes alcoholic, has alcohol in it, and then the Bible states that that's a terrible thing to be involved in. That it says in Proverbs 20 verse 1, wine is a mocker and strong drink is raging, and whoever is deceived by it is not wise. And the priests in the temple who were to teach the people what was right and wrong were never ever to drink any of that alcohol. That was very clear so that they could have clear minds and teach truth. So that is why those young men that came from Jerusalem and were put in the training program were now tempted to compromise by the devil to eat things they shouldn't eat and to drink things they shouldn't drink. Now, there's a popular thing going on nowadays in some Christian circles that I think is good, and it's called the 10-day Daniel fast. And it has the idea of going 10 days without all the garbage that we're used to going, and going back more to fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables like in the very beginning, and lots of water to drink and some fresh grape juice and things like that. And so that may be something good. When you look at the book of Revelation, you find that a dominant theme is the wine of Babylon. Isn't that interesting? This kind of wine was that negative wine. And in Revelation, it is a symbol of false teaching by a false church. Now let's look at the third strategy that Satan uses to try to get godly young people to have Babylonian minds. Let's go to verse 6. Now among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And I'm going to invite you to circle this phrase, sons of Judah. Now these were boys that had grown up primarily in godly homes. They knew what was right and wrong, and they were surrounded with the language and literature of the Babylonians, and they were surrounded by the king's delicacies and the king's alcoholic wine, and they knew what was right and wrong, but most of them gave in to wrong. Most of them said, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. There were 4, Daniel and his 3 friends, that stood out from the others. And they began saying, no, this is not right. Well, we would call this peer pressure. Peer pressure is a third strategy Satan uses to try to get us to compromise and become more like Babylonian thinking. You see, all of these kids that knew better were doing something wrong, and then when they looked at each other, they said, well, they're a Jew too, and they're doing it, so I guess it's okay. Well, they're a Jew. True followers of God don't look at other followers of God, they look to God. A true Christian doesn't follow Christians, they follow Christ. And peer pressure is a powerful, powerful thing. And so it's important to recognize that the devil will try to surround us with people that will cause us to compromise. In fact, the people we're around frequently, the 10 people you're around the most, you will become the average of them after a few years. So be careful who you're around. And if you say, well, I'm not around people, I just sit at home. I just watch TV and watch my movies. Well, then the 10 people you watch on TV or in the movies most, you're going to become like in a few years. No, I'm not saying that you're going to become rich and famous like them. I'm saying you're going to have the same dysfunctional relationships they have with people in real life, not in make-believe life. And so it's important who we pick to be around. And I'm so glad that you're in a youth group, a young adult group, so that you have a chance to be around godly people. But just because you're in a youth group doesn't mean you're connecting with God. We need each to have that direct connection and look to Jesus to become like Him. A few years ago, there was a student in a university, public university, and they saw an advertisement in the student paper, and they said, oh, I'm going to do this. I can get $20 for 30 minutes of work. I like that. That's a pretty good rate of pay. And so they went down and they signed up, and they were explained exactly what was happening. They said, we're in an auditorium. You'll be one of 15 people in the auditorium. And what we want you to do is you'll be spread out, and you'll be able to, we're going to show you some things, and you tell us how you see it from your angle. And so this guy said, great. He showed up at the right time. He went in with the other 14 people in his group. They scattered them across the auditorium. And then the person on the stage said, okay, I have here 3 lines on papers. One is longer, another is medium, another is shorter. When I point at the longest line, I want you to raise your hand. And so the person on the platform pointed at the shortest line. No hands went up. Then they pointed at the middle line, and 14 hands went up. And the guy thought, well, I must not be seeing it straight. So he raised his hand too. He had no idea that they were secretly watching him, and they told all the other 14 to raise their hand on the one that wasn't the longest line, and they were studying him to see if he would buckle under peer pressure. And when he saw everybody else raising their hand, he raised his hand. They brought in person after person after person to test, and they found that 80% of the time, the person would just go along with the other 14, even though it obviously wasn't the longest line that was being pointed to. 20% of the time, though, there were people who said, I don't care what everybody else is doing, that's not the longest line, and they'd wait for the longest line. The researchers went into the second phase of their experiment, and they actually, instead of having 14 people that were planted, they had 13 people that were planted and 2 that they were observing. And they discovered that when they would go through that same sequence, that only 20% of the time would the 2 go along with the 13 that were planted when it wasn't the longest line. When you have one other person that isn't going along with the crowd, it strengthens you to say, you know, that's not right. I'm not going to go with that. And so God in His mercy to Daniel gave him 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, so that they together could push against that peer pressure. And friends, it's crucial to have 1 or 2 or 3 godly friends who will not do just what you want them to do or what the world wants them to do, or especially what the devil wants them to do, but will do what they believe God wants them to do, who will go with what the Bible teaches. And so we see the sons of Judah, most of them went the wrong way, and there is peer pressure. Satan uses peer pressure to get us to sign up for Babylonian thinking, but we're determined not to do that. Now let's go to the 4th strategy that Satan uses to try to get us all tripped up. In verse 7, to them, meaning Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and we assume to all of them, but especially to them, the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. Now I'm going to invite you to circle the word names. Names. Now what is this really all about? What we need to do is to understand a little bit of the Hebrew Jewish thinking as opposed to the Babylonian thinking. In the Jewish way of thinking, godly Jewish parents wanted their children's main hero in life, their superhero, to be God Himself. They didn't want to have any false gods or idols or whatever. They wanted their kids to have God, the Creator God, as their superhero. So they would usually give them a name that had some form of God's name in it, in some relationship to them. So it's very common to find the names in the Old Testament, which are Hebrew names, have the word Yah or Ah or El. That's what we find here. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. And so what did these names mean? What they meant was Daniel meant God is my judge. Hananiah meant Yahweh is gracious to me. You see, there are many names for God, but Elohim, or El, stood for God and His power. And Yahweh, or Yah, stood for God in His intimacy and closeness. And so Daniel meant God, the mighty God, the powerful God, is my judge. Hananiah meant Yahweh is gracious and loving. Mishael meant who is what God is. And Azariah meant Yahweh helps. Yahweh helps. And so Babylonian thinking was, we don't want you thinking about the Creator God and the living God as your superhero. We want you to have Babylonian gods as your heroes. We want you to worship Bel, which is another form of Baal. Bel. And we want you to worship Nebo, his son. And we want you to pick as a hero Aku, the moon god. And so we're going to give you names that will remind you of these other gods or heroes. And so here you find this captain, or the names that were given by the chief of the eunuchs. He said, your name means God is my judge? No. Your new name is Belteshazzar, which means may Bel be your protector. Your name is Hananiah. What does that mean? Well, that means Yahweh is gracious. No. Your new name is Shadrach. You are going to live by the command of Aku, the moon god. And what is your name? Well, my name is Mishael. And what does that mean? Well, Mishael means who is what God is. No. Your new name is Meshach, which means who is what Aku is. And what is your name, young man? Well, my name is Azariah. And what does that mean? Yahweh helps. Oh, no. That's not your name now. Your new name is Abednego, servant of Nebo. You see, one of the ways the devil tries to get us to compromise is to get us to pick the wrong heroes that will change our identity. You see, our hero, our true hero, needs to be the living God who made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is. And that's why every Sabbath, it's a reminder to remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is. And our hero needs to be God, and we need to live our lives thinking of Him as the true hero. But if the devil can get us to think of our hero, our greatest hero, being that movie star, that rock star, that TV character, that cartoon character, that video game character, if the devil can get us to shift our identity away from our relationship with God and have our heroes be human or other gods, then they become our heroes and we become more and more like them, and we are trading God's thinking for Babylonian thinking. And we don't want that. We want to realize our relationship with God. He's our true hero. And then we come to the fifth key strategy that the devil tries to get us to compromise and to think Babylonian thoughts. We find it here in verse 8. But Daniel purposed, that means decided, not just kind of decided, but decided. Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore, he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. I am inviting you to circle these phrases: Daniel purposed and not defile. You see, decisions. If the devil can get us to make little decisions in the wrong way, then he can get us to make bigger decisions in the wrong way. They say that most people who use hard drugs started with smaller drugs that they began to abuse. I think of the man that went to the psychologist, and he said, he was telling his problems, and the psychologist said, "So do you have trouble making decisions?" And he said, "Well, yes and no." Well, yes, he did have trouble making decisions. He couldn't even make that decision. But as followers of the true God, here's the key. Don't spend all your energy making minor decisions. Just make the big decisions right and put your energy into those. For example, who is going to be in charge of my life today, God or me? Get that straight first thing in the morning. And then another big decision. How will I support myself in life? And how will I do it in such a way that I can let my light shine and lead people to Jesus and help them to be ready for His soon return? Or another big decision. If I marry, who will I marry? And will I marry somebody who loves God more than they love me, so that we'll love each other forever? Don't waste your time with what you will eat and what you will drink and what you will wear. These are important. These are important. But if you spend all your time thinking of how you're going to look and what's the latest restaurant you're going to and all the rest, Jesus said that's what the pagans put all of their energy into. Now, yes, we should enjoy good, wholesome food. We should look nice and not weird and non-presentable. But don't let those things dominate our minds. We're going to make the big decisions and get those settled, and from that flows all of the other decisions. Well, I remember having a man who I was getting ready to baptize. And this man had a rough background. I mean, when he was 37 years old, he had a heart attack because of all the drugs he had used and all the alcohol he had consumed. And he raced off. He was taken to the emergency room, and they had a bunch of people in line, and he started having this heart attack. 37 years old, fell on the floor and started crawling up to the desk and said, "Can they see me a little sooner?" Well, if you need to see a doctor in the emergency room, that'll work. That'll get you in there fast. So they got him in there fast, and his heart stopped. And so they tried to get it started, and they couldn't get it started. And they injected him, and they couldn't get it started. And they put paddles on him, and they shocked him, and that didn't work. And so they put stronger paddles on him and shocked him and jolted him, and he bit his tongue almost in two. I saw him later that night because I had baptized his girlfriend the year before, and she said, "Can you come see him?" So I went to the emergency room, and there he lay. ICU. And I thought he'd be comatose, but he was alert. He was aware. And I walked in, and I said, "God must have a purpose for you. Here you are, still alive." And he said, "Yeah, that's right." His tongue was so swollen from biting it so hard. And I said, "If you could see Jesus standing here right now," and he said, "I want to give you eternal life. Will you be my forever friend so I can help you? I can cover you, all of your sins. I can wash them away, and I can give you a new start." What would you say to Jesus? I'll never forget. He's lying there in bed, and he says, "I want it. I want it." And I said, "Then you can have it. You can have it, because you're deciding right now to start a new direction of decisions, and God will help you." A week or two later, he got out of the hospital. And then he came to the church a week after that, and he gave his testimony. And the week after that, we had his baptism. And it was time for that baptism, and there he was, and he got up there, and I stepped into the water, and this was farther north than in Texas. And they had forgotten to heat the water in the baptistry, and it was ice cold. And I stepped in, and I just froze up and cringed, and I stepped down a few steps, and then I looked back at him, and I realized this guy is 3 weeks from a heart attack. I don't know if this is safe. And I whispered to him, I said, "Listen, they forgot to heat the baptistry. So what we can do is we can postpone it till after the sermon, and then we can have the baptism when it's a little warmer. What do you think?" And I'll never forget what he said. He said, "If I don't go forward with Jesus now, I'm afraid I might never go forward with him. I'm going in even if I die in the baptistry." I'm thinking, I don't want anybody dying in the baptistry, but I guess baptism is a symbol of death to our old way of thinking, our old way of life, and it's rising to a new life. And I said, "It's up to you." And he said, "Okay." And he stepped into the water, and he kind of froze up a little bit like I did. All the nurses and doctors in the congregation sat at the edge of their chair ready to race up and give CPR or do whatever they needed to do. But he stepped down the next step, and the next step, and the next step. And then I said, I said his name, "Because you love Jesus with all of your heart, and you want to follow him for the rest of your days, and you want to live for him, and you know that it's going to be a challenge to live in Jesus' kingdom because Satan has had you for so long, to learn to think Jesus' thoughts instead of those old sinful thoughts. But you are deciding to bury that past life in the waters of baptism and to leave it there and to rise with Jesus to live a new Christ-centered life in His kingdom without compromise, but for Jesus and Jesus alone. Is that what you want? And his tongue had gotten a little better and he says, I want it, I want it, I want it. And today, young people, I'm just going to ask you, I know what you want to do. You know the pull of sin and temptation. You have seen yourself, I'm sure, in these verses, just like I have. And no matter what age we are, the devil's trying to introduce Babylonian thinking into our lives. But we want to line up on Jesus' side. Day after day after day. We want to determine in our heart to be what Jesus wants us to be. We want to be like Daniel and his friends, that 10 days later, they look better and they're healthier, and 3 years later, they're 10 times wiser. That's what we want. And all we have to say is, Jesus, I want it, I want it, I want it. And I'm going to invite you right now, out loud, if you want that, and I think you do, to say it with me. Jesus, I want it, I want it, I want it. Jesus, give me your way of thinking and not Babylonian thinking. Help me not to be a Christian or even a Seventh-day Adventist on the outside, but thinking Babylonian thoughts on the inside. Help my hero to really be you, Jesus, more than any other hero. Help me to be careful of what I expose my mind to and what decisions I make. And help me to each day become more and more like you until you come again. Let me pray with you. Eternal Father in heaven, thank you so much for your love for us, your kindness, your forgiveness and cleansing. Lord, thank you that all of the garbage of our past can be washed away in the waters of baptism. And I believe there may be some who are listening that need to be baptized for their next step or need to be rebaptized. And Lord, I just pray that you will help them connect with godly people who will set them up to be baptized soon. And there may be others here, Lord, who are listening, who realize, yes, I've been baptized and I've kind of lived for the Lord, but now that I think about it, I'm really letting the devil capture my best thoughts, my best energies. I'm letting the devil keep changing my thinking away from God's thinking. And Lord, I just pray that they will determine each day to say, I want it, Jesus. I want it. I want it. And Lord, help them become all the people that they want to be, to really become the type of person that they want to be, and to be 10 times wiser 3 years from now, and 10 days from now, to be healthier and stronger and have a clearer mind. Lord, help us. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. Every day, I want it, I want it, I want it.